While he was still speaking with them, Rachel came with her father's sheep, for she was a shepherdess. And it came to pass, when Jacob saw Rachel the daughter of Laban his mother's brother, and the sheep of Laban his mother's brother, that Jacob went near and rolled the stone from the well's mouth, and watered the flock of Laban his mother's brother. Then Jacob kissed Rachel, and lifted up his voice and wept. And Jacob told Rachel that he was her father's relative, and that he was Rebekah's son. So she ran and told her father. My name's Arthur. Thank you for joining me as we continue reading the story of Jacob in Genesis chapter 29. It's 90 years since Abraham had sent his servant to fetch Rebekah, Jacob's mother, from this place as a wife for Isaac, Jacob's father. And in that time there had been reports back and forward, but it seems that there had been no contact between Rebekah and her brother and the family. Now that Jacob was 70 years old and was fleeing from his brother, Isaac had sent him back to Rebekah's family to fetch a wife. And on the way, when he had come to Bethel, he had had an encounter with the Lord. Up until that point in his life, he had lived his life with the knowledge of God, but without a personal experience of God. But God had come to him. And the Lord wants to come to us. If the scriptures in several places declare that if we seek the Lord, he will be found by us, because the Lord is seeking those who will walk in his ways. Up until this point, Jacob had not walked in the ways of the Lord. He needed to learn God's ways, and it would be some time yet before his name would be changed from Jacob to Israel. For he needed to learn to trust God, and to be on the receiving end of the deception that he had played on others. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Jacob had encountered God when he had dreamed of a ladder, and seen the angels ascending and descending on it, and seen the Lord above the ladder. This is the first description of the appearance of the Lord in heaven, high above the earth, but nevertheless visible in heaven, and sending his blessing down to earth. And the Lord had spoken to Jacob, and Jacob had responded, saying, "The Lord will be my God, if the Lord does those things that he says, and brings me back to my father's house in peace." But that will be a longer time than he expects. Well, he completes his journey then, and meets his cousin, Rachel. We read from Genesis 29, verse 1. Jacob went on his journey, and came to the land of the people of the east. And he looked, and he saw a well in the field. And behold, there were 3 flocks of sheep lying by it, for out of that well they watered the flocks. A large stone was on the well's mouth. Now all the flocks would gather there, and they would roll the stone from the well's mouth, water the sheep, and put the stone back in its place on the well's mouth. And Jacob said to them, "My brethren, where are you from?" And they said, "We are from Haran." And he said to them, "Do you know Laban the son of Nahor?" And they said, "We know him." So he said to them, "Is he well?" And they said, "He is well. And look, his daughter Rachel is coming with the sheep." Then he said, "Look, it is still high day. It is not time for the cattle to be gathered together. Water the sheep and go and feed them." But they said, "We cannot until all the flocks are gathered together, and they have rolled the stone from the well's mouth. Then we water the sheep." Now while he was still speaking with them, Rachel came with her father's sheep, for she was a shepherdess. And it came to pass, when Jacob saw Rachel the daughter of Laban his mother's brother, and the sheep of Laban his mother's brother, that Jacob went near, and rolled the stone from the well's mouth, and watered the flock of Laban his mother's brother. Then Jacob kissed Rachel, and lifted up his voice and wept. And Jacob told Rachel that he was her father's relative, and that he was Rebekah's son. So she ran and told her father. Then it came to pass that when Laban heard the report, about Jacob his sister's son, that he ran to meet him, and embraced him, and kissed him, and brought him to his house. So he told Laban all these things. And Laban said to him, Surely you are my bone and my flesh. And he stayed with him for a month. Then Laban said to Jacob, Because you are my relative, should you therefore serve me for nothing? Tell me, what should your wages be? Now Laban had 2 daughters. The name of the elder was Leah, and the name of the younger was Rachel. Leah's eyes were delicate, but Rachel was beautiful of form and appearance. Now Jacob loved Rachel, so he said, I will serve you 7 years for Rachel, your younger daughter. And Laban said, It is better that I give her to you than that I should give her to another man. Stay with me. So Jacob served 7 years for Rachel, and they seemed only a few days to him, because of the love he had for her. And may the Lord bless these words to us. Well, as we've read the story of Abraham, Isaac and Jacob, we see wells are very important places, because that's where the sheep are watered from. To graze the countryside, the sheep need water in the vicinity, and this water comes from wells. It comes from below the ground. And here they had a custom where all the flocks would be gathered together before they would open the well and draw the water. And it seems Jacob was a bit surprised that they limited the grazing time of the sheep just to have a system of watering all the flocks together. Nevertheless, that was the way that they did it. And so we are reminded of 90 years earlier, when Abraham's servant came to a well, and there the Lord introduced him to Rebekah, who came to draw water, and watered the camels. But here the story is reversed. Rachel comes with her father's sheep, and Jacob waters the sheep for her, and introduces himself to his cousin, rejoicing that he has met his uncle's family. He came to the place. Where are you from? We're from Haran. Do you know Laban the son of Nahor? We know him. Now, Laban, of course, being the older brother of Rebekah, is probably 110 or 120 years old. He's the patriarch of that family at this point in time. And so he's no longer a young man. But Rachel is a young woman, serving her father by caring for the sheep. Although Jacob is described as being an indoors person, he would have learned the trade of caring for the sheep because that was so fundamental to Isaac's life. He may not have liked it, but he would have learned the trade, and so he knew about sheep, and he was comfortable working with them, even though he may not have liked very much that line of work. And so here he is pleased to make the acquaintance of his relatives, and he is more than willing to serve them, to water the sheep, and to rejoice in so doing, in meeting up with the family. Well, after a month being with the family, Laban says to him, Surely you are my bone and my flesh. But you shouldn't serve me for nothing just because you're my relative. What wages would you like? And Jacob asks for the hand in marriage of Rachel, saying, I'll serve you 7 years for Rachel. Now there was an older daughter, but she was not anywhere near as beautiful. There was some issue with her eyes, but Jacob didn't take much notice of her. His eyes were fixed on Rachel, and those 7 years passed very quickly as he served for the hand in marriage of Rachel. And we understand that in caring for the sheep, Jacob would have spent a lot of time out in the fields with the sheep, taking them away great distances from home while they were grazing. And so he was limited in his contact with Rachel during those 7 years. But he was also very diligent in his service. He cared for the sheep. He did a good job because he valued his reward. They seemed only a few days to him because of the love he had for her.